Arthur endeavored to emulate his father in every way. It wasn't because John William was affluent and successful, but rather because he remained a humble man who didn't flaunt his wealth. Arthur was well aware that his father had worked tirelessly to attain his achievements, in stark contrast to John Hall's spouse. She led a more leisurely life, avoiding heavy work while her husband spent his days at the office. Rosemary's days were filled with shopping, beauty salons, and extravagant restaurants. But this didn't make her a bad wife or an irresponsible mother. She was just financially imprudent, unable to save for an initial investment in her own business. John never reproached his wife for this, always treating her with affection and care. Nonetheless, he was determined to raise his son to excel in business. He dedicated all of his free time to Arthur's upbringing, resulting in Arthur growing into an intelligent young man who consistently made his parents proud with his academic achievements, both in school and at university. John was immensely content with his son's development, sparing no effort to ensure Arthur lacked nothing. As a businessman with a small yet profitable company, John had established a firm footing in life. He possessed a beautiful 2-story house, a high-end car, and a respectable bank account balance that served as his financial security net. When Arthur graduated from the university, he chose to follow in his father's footsteps, although he opted to work for a different, smaller firm. "I want to try my hand at something different," Arthur remarked during a family dinner. "If it doesn't work out, I can always join your company." John regarded his son thoughtfully and accepted his decision with grace. He understood that Arthur didn't want to be perceived solely as the owner's son in their family business, mindful of the potential for him to be labeled as a pampered young man. Thus, Arthur embarked on a new journey by taking on a managerial role in a smaller company. From the very beginning, Arthur demonstrated himself as a responsible and diligent employee. He genuinely enjoyed his work, a fact underscored by his outstanding performance. When Arthur Hall first joined the company, he didn't go unnoticed, particularly by the women in the office. His good looks and polite demeanor set him apart from most of his colleagues. The first woman who mustered the courage to strike up a conversation with this handsome newcomer was Charlie, whose desk was conveniently situated near Arthur's as the new manager. Charlie had been with the company for several years and was familiar with the office dynamics. However, opinions about her were polarized. Some admired her beauty and considered her a role model, while others viewed her as a manipulative and unscrupulous individual who would go to great lengths to get her way. Arthur, being relatively inexperienced with romantic interactions and unable to distinguish between genuine interest and casual flirting, quickly found himself entranced by Charlie's charms. He exercised restraint initially, but after just a couple of dates, realized he was in love. Their romance progressed rapidly, leaving Arthur with little time to evaluate the situation and understand what he truly wanted from the relationship. He cherished the time he spent with Charlie, and the fiery passion in his heart intensified his desire for the relationship. Not surprisingly, Arthur's change in behavior piqued John Hall's interest. Is Arthur too young to be in a serious relationship? He contemplated, reflecting on his own experiences at a similar age. Meanwhile, Arthur continued to date Charlie, who seemed eager to take their relationship to the next level, perhaps even marriage. The course of events took an unexpected turn when a new employee, Alyssa, joined the company. Alyssa was the antithesis of Charlie in terms of both character and appearance. Seated right next to Arthur, she immersed herself in her work and avoided getting entangled in office drama. Alyssa's diligent efforts quickly paid off, and she began achieving results that outshone Arthur's accomplishments by several magnitudes. Maggie once uttered, "She's an insufferable, arrogant woman. I'm certain she doesn't have a boyfriend, and she never will." Alyssa chose to disregard her colleagues' cutting remarks and carried on with her work as if unfazed by their comments. Despite her modest attire, she possessed an appealing look and engaged in intriguing conversations. If Arthur weren't in a relationship with Maggie, he might have found himself drawn to her. Nevertheless, being a man of good moral character, he couldn't entertain the thought of betraying his girlfriend. Alyssa, in turn, appeared disinterested in pursuing a relationship with Arthur. Occasional exchanges of words with the intelligent and well-spoken young man sufficed for her. Maggie, viewing Alyssa as a rival, decided to launch a preemptive attack to tarnish her image in Arthur's eyes. Somehow, Maggie managed to uncover Alyssa's humble upbringing and her residence in a modest neighborhood in the city. "What is this pauper doing in our company? Dressed like a scarecrow but dreaming of success," Maggie proudly declared, utilizing the information to subject Alyssa to constant scrutiny and ridicule at the office. Arthur, however, didn't share his girlfriend's perspective and never fixated on Alyssa's appearance. He began to have doubts about his relationship with Maggie, realizing that she might be driven solely by his father's substantial fortune. "If I didn't have so much money, I'd probably be in Maggie's place right now," Arthur contemplated. These doubts plagued him for an extended period until he finally decided to seek advice from his father. Upon hearing his son's concerns, John Hall pondered for a moment. He recognized the complexities of matters of the heart, having experienced his own share of relationships and youthful love. Remarkably, John's heart still held on to the memory of a profound and genuine love he had encountered during his college years. What made it even more intriguing was the fact that he didn't truly love his wife. Marrying Rosemary was more of an attempt to bury the anguish of a painful breakup with the woman he had genuinely loved more than anything else. The love of the businessman's life is a woman named Juliet, hailing from a humble background. Unfortunately, John's parents strongly disapproved of their relationship, going to great lengths to try to break them apart. Rosemary also played a role in John's separation from Juliet, as her parents had long envisioned her marrying John. 25 years ago, she presented John with a photograph of Juliet alongside another man. Rosemary did not reveal the source of the picture, only hinting that doubting its authenticity would be a painful mistake. However, what John saw in the photograph was sufficient to make him cease all communication with Juliet that very day, despite the agonizing nature of the decision. He removed her entirely from his life. Nevertheless, John did not succumb to despair, as Rosemary provided support to help him through the breakup. She enveloped John with care and attention, which eventually played a pivotal role in their subsequent relationship. Rosemary achieved her long-held dream of becoming John's wife. It was doubtful that she loved him with her whole heart, a sentiment John sensed, preventing him from experiencing genuine happiness with her. Upon hearing his son's arguments, John decided to assist him. "I'm ready to help you out, son. Do you have a plan in mind?" John inquired. Arthur hesitated for a moment, then gathered his thoughts and shared his idea with his father. "I do have an intriguing plan, Dad. What if I were to introduce you to my girlfriend?" John raised an eyebrow in astonishment. "Is this your plan, simply introducing me to your girlfriend?" Arthur smiled enigmatically and continued, "No, Dad. I have a slightly different idea. I want you to disguise yourself as a homeless man when I introduce you to her. It's crucial for me to see how she would react, and you could also assess how she would treat you. So, what do you say? Will you do it?" To say that John Hall was taken aback would be a massive understatement. The businessman had always considered himself to be astute and imaginative, but his son's inventiveness clearly outshone his own. Frankly, John found Arthur's idea rather amusing. "Why not? It's not a bad idea. I'm so used to wearing suits that I consider them my second skin. Why not change things up a bit and show up at dinner dressed as a beggar?" the businessman said with a smile. After discussing all the details with his son, John began preparing for the fateful meeting on the showdown day. Arthur had invited Maggie to a dinner at a modest restaurant to introduce her to his father. As she readied herself for the evening, Maggie couldn't help but think, "God, finally. I thought it would never happen. He's taking me to meet his father today. He's probably going to propose," she mused. Meanwhile, John meticulously altered his appearance with a wig and a false beard, borrowing clothes from the gardener and intentionally soiling them for a more authentic look. Dressed in his new attire, John smiled at his reflection in the mirror, giving himself a confident thumbs up. Arthur had chosen a relatively modest restaurant in the city, which left Maggie feeling profoundly disappointed. She thought, "Having that kind of money, he invited me to some diner," pursing her lips in dissatisfaction. Little did she know that this disappointment would pale in comparison to what awaited her that evening. The real shock came when a stooped beggar approached Arthur and pulled up a chair to join them at their table. "Honey, meet my dad," Arthur said with a serious expression. Maggie, with a disgusted frown, asked, "What did you just say? Your dad? Is that really your father?" John Hall coughed awkwardly, appraising the woman. It quickly became apparent to the businessman that Maggie was only with Arthur for the family's wealth. She acted as if not just John but even Arthur was some kind of destitute beggar. In the meantime, Arthur played his role so convincingly that the cunning beauty didn't doubt for a moment that it was all real. Maggie, not bothering to conceal her disdain, abruptly left the table only 10 minutes into the dinner. "You don't need to see me off. You better take care of yourself or you might end up like your father soon," she quipped before parting ways. Father and son exchanged knowing glances, understanding each other perfectly. Arthur came to the realization that Maggie didn't deserve him, and marrying her would be a grave mistake. After a delightful dinner, The father and son generously tipped the waiter and exited the restaurant. On their way to the car, John removed his wig and peeled off his fake beard. Suddenly, Arthur halted to greet a woman passing by. It was Alyssa, returning home from the store. "Hey, I was having dinner with my dad," Arthur said, smiling. Alyssa glanced at the modestly dressed father and nodded in return. John stepped closer to better observe the stranger's face in the glow of a nearby street lamp. At that moment, it felt as if he were struck by lightning. It seemed that everything happening at that moment couldn't be real, and was just a trick of his imagination or a play of his memory. The businessman tried to convince himself that it was simply his imagination playing tricks on him. He reasoned that the resemblance between Alyssa and his ex-girlfriend Juliet had to be coincidental, as such things happen frequently. Thoughts raced through John's mind, but no matter how hard he attempted to dismiss it, the uncanny similarity between Alyssa and his former love continued to nag at him. As time passed, John couldn't ignore the question that had been bothering him. He decided to ask Alyssa directly. "Good evening, miss. May I ask you a question? Is your mother's name Juliet, by any chance?" Alyssa's face went pale, and she involuntarily took a couple of steps back. "Yes, sir. My mother's name was Juliet Winter. She actually passed away 3 years ago due to leukemia." "Why are you asking? Did you know her?" the woman asked cautiously. John lowered his gaze and mumbled something unintelligible. He was so stunned by the news of the death of the woman he had loved with all his heart that he couldn't say much more. Fortunately, Arthur was unaware of the true reasons behind his father's strange behavior, and continued to engage in conversation with Alyssa. Meanwhile, John remained standing, secretly marveling at the young woman who was an exact duplicate of his beloved Juliet. Although the encounter was brief, it felt like an eternity to the businessman. Upon returning home, John locked himself in his office and hired a private detective. He needed to uncover the truth about Juliet Winter's past. Did she have a husband? How old was Alyssa? And could she possibly be his daughter? In the end, John asks the detective to investigate Maggie Poppy as well. He had to wait for about 2 weeks before receiving the report, primarily because a DNA test was the only way to definitively answer the question of possible paternity. When John finally received the report, he was beyond shocked. Alyssa was indeed his daughter, and Juliet Winter had never been in a serious relationship with anyone else. Moreover, the detective discovered that Maggie Poppy had ulterior motives for her relationship with Arthur. She was not only after his money, but also involved in sabotaging John's business by engaging in a series of unsuccessful deals, orchestrated by John's competitors. The most surprising revelation was that the photograph Rosemary had shown John 24 years ago had been a forgery. It turned out that Rosemary had been so desperate to marry John that she resorted to deception to make him break up with his girlfriend. While it was impossible to change the past, John decided not to dwell on it further. What mattered was that, by fate's hand, he had discovered a daughter who was Arthur's half-sister. This realization filled John's heart with a love he thought he'd never experience again. To Rosemary's credit, she accepted Alyssa with calmness and didn't create a scene. With one more child in their family, it was clear that it was time to embrace the future with love and respect for the family as the top priority. Everyone involved in this remarkable story chose to begin anew, leaving the past behind.